Philippines bolsters posture in South China Sea after Navy ship docks at new Spratly Islands port. A Philippine Navy ship, the BRP Ivatan, recently docked at a newly built port on Pag-asa or Thitu Island, its largest occupied feature in the South China Sea. This, and the arrival of a new multirole frigate from South Korea, demonstrate Manila's resolve to defend its interests, even as ties with Beijing improve. Pag-asa Island, otherwise known as Thitu Island, is situated in the Spratly Islands in the disputed South China Sea. The Philippines has built a port and is upgrading the airstrip. Photo, AFP. Two recent developments in the South China Sea are poised to enhance the Philippines' position in the increasingly tense flashpoint and allay criticism that President Rodrigo Duterte's administration is lacking resolve in defending the country's interests. On May 13, Philippine Navy ship BRP Ivatan became the first vessel to dock at the nearly completed port of Pag-asa, Thitu Island, Manila's largest occupied feature in the Spratly Islands in the disputed sea. And last weekend, the country's first modern multirole frigate from South Korea, BRP Jose Rizal, arrived in Subic Naval Base. Chinese Air Force lands nuclear-capable bombers on island in disputed South China Sea. Beijing accused of destabilizing region after Air Force conducts exercises with long-range aircraft. The Chinese Air Force has landed long-range bombers at an airport in the South China Sea for the first time, a move which has fueled concerns about Beijing's ambitions to assert control over the disputed territory. China conducted takeoff and landing training with nuclear-capable H-6K aircraft, state media reported, prompting U.S. warnings about destabilizing region. Beijing is pitted against smaller neighbors in multiple disputes over islands, coral reefs and lagoons in the waters of the South China Sea, which are important for global commerce and rich in fish and potential oil and gas reserves. The Defense Ministry said the exercises were carried out on an island reef, but it did not specify when or where. The drills involved several H-6 kiloseconds taking off from an air base and making a simulated strike against sea targets before landing, the ministry said. The statement quoted a Chinese military expert, Wang Mingliang, as saying the exercises would help the Air Force improve its real combat ability against all kinds of marine security threats. The Washington-based Asia Maritime Transparency Initiative, using Chinese social media posts, identified the location of the exercise as Woody Island, China's largest base in the Paracel Islands. With a combat radius of nearly 1,900 nautical miles, the H-6K bomber would have all of Southeast Asia in its range from the island, the center said. Further south, in the Spratly group of islands, China has constructed 7 man-made islands and equipped them with runways, hangars, radar and missile stations, further cementing its vast territorial claims in the busy waterway. The US and others accuse Beijing of militarizing the region to bolster its claims. The United States remains committed to a free and open Indo-Pacific, said a Pentagon spokesman. We have seen these same reports, and China's continued militarization of disputed features in the South China Sea only serves to raise tensions and destabilize the region. Admiral Phil Davidson, head of the U.S. Pacific Command, said last month that China had built up enough military force in the South China Sea to completely control the region. Once occupied, China will be able to extend its influence thousands of miles to the south and project power deep into Oceania, he said. China will be able to use these bases to challenge U.S. presence in the region, and any forces deployed to the islands would easily overwhelm the military forces of any other South China Sea claimants. In short, China is now capable of controlling the South China Sea in all scenarios short of war with the United States. Earlier this month, the White House warned the U.S. there would be near-term and long-term consequences for China if it continued to militarize the South China Sea. In March, China condemned the U.S. for serious political and military provocation after a U.S. Navy destroyer sailed within 12 nautical miles of an artificial island built in disputed waters. Russia prepares for largest war games since Cold War. Military exercises will include Chinese troops for the first time in what is being viewed as a major geopolitical shift. Russia has begun preparing for the largest war games since the height of the Cold War, with combat readiness drills putting hundreds of thousands of troops on high alert. The Vostok 2018 exercises, which will begin on the eastern fringe of the country at the end of August, are remarkable not only in scale. Incorporating Chinese armed forces for the first time, they also seem to indicate a major geopolitical shift in the region. Moscow has previously viewed China, its richer and more populous neighbor, with suspicion. Authorities in Beijing have confirmed that 3,200 soldiers, 900 tanks and 30 jets and helicopters will take part in the maneuvers. A smaller number will be contributed by Mongolian army. Russia will contribute a more substantial, as yet unspecified, number from 2 military districts. The promise of a new record would suggest the participation of more than the 100,000 servicemen, 1,500 tanks, 120 aircraft, and 70 ships seen in similar drills in 2014. Speaking on Monday, Sergei Shoigu, the Russian Minister of Defense, described the upcoming maneuvers as the largest military exercise since 1981, unprecedented in geography and the number of military units taking part. Zvezda, a TV channel run by his ministry, said the exercises would mirror the style of those high Soviet war games. The 1981 drills were also wide in scope and included foreign partners, from the Warsaw Pact countries. The upward trend in numbers reflects a military that is finding its feet, and operating more widely, says Mark Galeotti, from the Institute of International Relations Prague. International collaboration has been at the heart of that expansion, he says. Despite furious Western attempts to isolate the Kremlin, countries still want to collaborate with Russia. By arms sales and cooperation, Russia is using its military strength to increase its geopolitical presence in the world. Russia and its partners have been tight-lipped about the detail of the Vostok 2018 exercise, the nature of the hypothetical attack and the identity of the external enemy. According to Mr. Galeotti, they will likely include insurgency and other non-conventional threats alongside traditional military threats. The general logic of the joint exercise suggests Moscow continues to see the US and its allies as its major strategic foe. It also could spell trouble for Russian-Japanese relations. Under the leadership of Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, Japan has embarked on a policy of engaging Moscow, and offering economic carrots, in the hope of a deal to resolve a 70-year territorial dispute over the South Kuril Islands. Mr. Abe is due to lend his face to Vladimir Putin's flagship Eastern Economic Forum in Vladivostok on the 11th of September. In a coincidence that may not go down well in Tokyo, this will also be the start date for joint military exercises with China. The Japanese approach to Russia was always naive, says Alexander Gabu, chair of the Asia-Pacific program at the Carnegie Moscow Center. A unique set of circumstances, Ukraine, President Donald Trump, sanctions and trade wars, has necessarily pushed Russia and China closer together at the expense of Japan. After Ukraine, Russia decided China was no longer a threat, certainly not in the next 15 to 20 years, says Mr. Gabu. Good relations with China are now a priority. Who else can promise billions of dollars to banks under US sanctions? China has done that with VEB. Japan, an ally of the US, certainly can't. Senior Russian lawmakers have meanwhile made little secret as to who they consider the target audience of Vostok 2018 to be. Speaking to Zvezda channel, Franz Klintsevich, member of the Defense and Security Committee in Russia's upper house, said the coordinated exercises were a signal to the United States. They were once very happy that our units, divisions and personnel were unpracticed and unable to collaborate, he said. Times have changed. But a complicated picture likely lurks behind the anti-American rhetoric, suggests Mr. Galeotti. Russia wants to be treated as a formidable power, but paradoxically, its view of the world revolves around Washington, he says. It desperately wants to be treated as a peer nation. Donald Trump says China should keep the seat U.S. Navy drone. His comment came after U.S. military announced understanding with China for return of underwater glider. Donald Trump has said the United States should let China keep the U.S. Navy drone it seized in the South China Sea. In his second tweet about the controversy on Saturday, the president-elect said, "We should tell China that we don't want the drone they stole back, let them keep it." His comment came a few hours after the U.S. military announced it had reached an understanding with China for the return of the underwater glider. According to the Pentagon, the drone was seized on Thursday while collecting unclassified scientific data in the South China Sea, which China claims virtually in its entirety. The USNS Bowditch, which is not a combat ship, was stopped in international waters on Thursday afternoon while attempting to recover two of its underwater gliders when the Chinese ship approached, taking one of the drones away. The U.S. demanded the return of the drone, calling it an unlawful seizure in international waters. China said its military seized the glider to ensure the safe navigation of passing ships, but said it would give it back. It was unclear what effect, if any, Mr. Trump's tweet would have on the agreement with the Chinese. Initially misspelling unprecedented, Mr. Trump tweeted on Saturday morning, China steals United States Navy research drone in international waters, rips it out of water and takes it to China in unprecedented act. He later deleted and then reposted the tweet to correct the spelling. Beijing has hit back in the diplomatic controversy over the seizure of the drone, accusing Washington of hyping up the issue after the president-elect's first tweet. Relations were already tense between the US and China after Mr. Trump's decision to talk with Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen by phone on the 2nd of December. The president-elect later said he did not feel bound by a one China policy regarding the status of Taiwan, unless the US could gain trade or other benefits from China. China considers the self-governing island to be its own territory, to be recovered by force if it deems necessary. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe for daily news update. God bless.